Good evening.
Hey, hey.
I'm Mike. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you too. This is the first one of these I've attended, so I don't know.
Oh, well, that makes two of us then.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm Jim, the new docs guy, and I know I don't think Ben's gonna make it tonight. I think he's pretty getting burning the late hours working for CES, and I think that Andrew Major is gonna run the meeting, so we'll let him call in and facilitate it.
Gotcha. Nice job, by the way, so far. It's helped me out.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. It's a lot to jump into. We'll talk about it, but we want to make sure that we start, making incremental progress while we look at the big picture too, right? So I think there's some things we might want to do long term around the, how it's presented in the organization, but we don't want to go away in a cave for a long time. We want to provide, impact as soon as possible. So I see the man in the closet is about to join.
Hey, how's it going?
That was quite the entrance.
Yeah, really.
Sorry, I'm in the closet right now.
I've always known.
Let's wait like maybe a few minutes before we start. But I don't know if Jim was telling you, but we met earlier to kind of like talk about documentation and some stuff we could improve on the developer site.
Why are you in the closet?
Well, I live in a studio apartment in San Francisco, and the closet is actually kind of big. So I have like a standing desk here, and I have like basically every type of SmartThings device. I use it as like kind of a test hub in here. And it's right near the router, so I got good internet.
We'll give people a few minutes to join. I know that changed up the time on people a little bit, so make sure that they remember.
Ben, were you in town in Minneapolis for the snow, or did you leave just before?
I saw a little bit of snow on the first day that we were there, but it just was a dusting, and it all melted. And then we had just left before you got the however many inches, and then luckily we left before you got to the 30 below. I'm not gonna live in 30 below anymore. Ridiculous.
Yeah, it all went downhill.
I've already been totally like softened by a year in DC and a couple months in California.
Lucky man. Took all the good weather with you.
Well, Jim is actually the man of the hour today. I'd like to introduce you. Here's Todd. There he is. Introduce you if you have not met yet. Jim, who is our document developer. He just started just a little bit over a week ago. Is that right?
Like a week and a half ago.
Oh,
2
yeah,
weeks.
2 weeks. So he's been poring over the developer documentation, looking at suggestions from all of you, and trying to, I'm helping him try to prioritize some of those. But what I wanted really is to have a session here where, you guys could really help shape the priorities of those exercises. Point him in the right direction, because we want to be making sure that we're addressing the most needed areas first. So, our agenda tonight is just to kind of like talk about that, and maybe Major wants to bring up some developer tools things as well. And so, yeah, I'd love to have it be focused on those things.
Yeah, we'll let Jim introduce himself too, but we could kind of get started with what Jim and I spoke about this morning and kind of like give you guys some ideas. That sound good?
Yeah. I'll give a brief introduction, and then I think, Andrew, you can talk about those things, and I think conversation will ensue. So my name is Jim Anderson. I have been with SmartThings, as been mentioned, for about 2 weeks. I've been in the software business, at least getting paid to either write software or write about software, for about 10 years. I have a development background, so CSI major, spent a lot of time working on enterprise level apps with a high level of customization points. So a lot of experience kind of designing, writing, and then evangelizing and writing about or documenting common APIs and toolkits. So as Ben mentioned, I've been reviewing our current documentation and also just obviously getting up to speed on SmartThings as a company and what they offer. And along the way, I've been making some updates you may have seen in the docs, trying to provide incremental value as we go. I was telling Mike earlier. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. So Andrew, I'll let you discuss some of the things that we had brought up about potential ideas.
Cool.
And see what people think.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of like summarize what we spoke about this morning. We've been looking at a lot of other websites that have great community and developer sites. Node.js has a great one, Twitter, Google, Thalmic Labs, who does the Mayo wristband, armband. Postmates just came out with a really nice developer site. We looked at Artio and Stripe. And then as far as like getting started tutorials, which is an area we really want to fix, GitHub has a really good tutorial. Firebase, Twilio, again, Stripe is really good. Mozilla, Vimeo, and then, yeah, we're basically, the main thing we want to start with is just better getting started guide. Basically just jump in there, learn what a smart app is, and then be able to write the code in about 15 or 20 minutes and have it working. Kind of question whether our current documentation platform, Read the Docs, is our best tool. We talked about how there might be a little bit of too much introduction information. You kind of have to read the docs like a book, but you should be able to like jump around more, we think. One quick thing we can do is build simple example smart apps that do one thing really well. So, for instance, control a switch with a contact sensor, or like how to use the schedule function, or how to control a switch with an API call. So, yeah, we should have, when you get to a developer portal, you should have like a couple of places you just know where to go to find information. We want to separate smart apps and device types, but have like the same type of content for each. Also, we're going to put Google Analytics on our doc site so we can really see like what pages are getting good traffic and how we can optimize it. And then maybe look at some third-party documentation sites like Mastery or readme.io. And basically our next steps, Jim and I agreed that we'd take some notes from this call and build an outline and then try to make changes on like a weekly basis. That's kind of my notes from the call this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, is there anything you wanted to add there?
No, I do. No, I think that's a good summary. I do want to ask Mike a question, if you don't mind putting me on the spot, Mike. But you mentioned that you got some use out of some updates that we did recently. I'm curious as to what specifically was useful, because that might help us understand what little areas we can improve, incrementally over time.
Basically, we went through and detailed quite a few of the odd things that exist in there. In other words, you were verbose in explaining the various sections of code. And I mean, most of the people I think that go into the environment probably aren't familiar with Groovy and probably have little to no experience with Java. And it's actually, even for me, it's difficult to determine, where SmartThings starts and stops and where, Groovy takes off. So there were several places where, I've had to go through and, go through other people's code ad nauseum to try to figure out exactly what things did. And you explained some of the odd, little subtleties about various function calls and method calls and stuff like that. So, I mean, it wasn't a huge thing, but I definitely could tell that you had put input into that, into explaining, why this method takes 2 parameters and sometimes it takes 3, and what the different, iterations and instances of it meant.
So would you say that having some tutorials available like that is a useful learning?
Well, I'm just waiting for you to do the same thing with the device types, because that's the one that's really confusing for me.
Yeah.
From the smart app perspective, it just explaining, and I can't tell you where these bits are, but you found the bits of code that were confusing to me and, put some explanation into them, in those places where it's not exactly obvious, why you would make a method call this way, or you were even explaining the difference in how to, how the different closure calls were made for Groovy. And you also put a link in there to the Groovy documentation, which I'd never seen before. I mean, I use that link, the site that you pointed out, but I mean, I see people all the time on the forums confused about, whether it's SmartThings or Groovy that they're dealing with.
Right. And that's going to be a challenge for us going forward, communicating, because there is a gray line between where SmartThings stops and Groovy starts. And Groovy is really, really cool. It's really, really powerful, and we've tapped into that at SmartThings and created that domain-specific language. So it is very elegant and reads very nicely and is very powerful, but it's not necessarily tightly bottled, right? So there's lots of dynamic properties to it, and documenting all that stuff can be really challenging. And so I think, one of the things that Major and I had talked about this morning is that there's a few different types of documentation, right? Like walking through an example, doing a tutorial is useful and seeing code, right? Then later, you also probably want just reference docs, something you just pull up, put on your second monitor or whatever, so you can view all the API docs, just the facts, right? So Mike, it sounds like for you, what was useful is kind of seeing some discussion around an app and not necessarily, that was helpful with the context around it, right? And what you'd like is something like that for the smart devices too, or
Well,
for
I'm
the
not
device.
saying, to be honest, I would have preferred to have, all the functions and parameters documented. I would have gone there first. But since I
Okay.
know that you had updated that section, all I'm saying is that I got value out of that. I mean,
No,
for
it's
me,
good. Good.
it gets a little bit windy to follow through all of it because most of it's, kind of a rehash. So for me, having the stuff documented in a way that is understandable is more useful. But, all I was saying is I did get value out of that section. And I think for somebody that's new, and particularly some of these people who are going to be writing smart apps haven't probably never written any code before. So it's, it's
Right.
valuable for them for sure.
And I think, and Ben or Major can correct me if I'm wrong, but our current philosophy is that if you have a basic web app developer background, you should be able to write smart apps. So I don't think we have the expectation that if you've never programmed or if you're not willing to learn programming, that you can come in and be successful writing smart apps. I think you're going to hit a wall too quickly.
I think we have to cater
But
to those people who've never coded before though too, and have the simplest, almost have them start with like a fresh blank computer, like a blank computer they just bought, and then have them writing smart apps in like 10 minutes and still help them install everything. Like just like have super beginner stuff too. Like I think we definitely need that.
Major, this is Terry.
Hey Terry.
Hi, I was just going to disagree with that. I mean, one thing that's coming up, I know, I talk about Wigwag sometimes, right? But they're building a graphical rules-based engine where you can drag and drop a sort of flow chart to build an app. That's a huge difference from writing code in Groovy, where you have to understand where every closing bracket is and so on, and understanding even the concept of variables and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Right? I'm not saying that SmartThings suddenly has to move to that model, although it'd be nice for it to get there at some point in time where there can be a rules-based engine that's even a graphical drag and drop flowchart type system. Trying to accommodate non-programmers just because that would give them the power to automate their homes more so than using the collection of smart apps that are written by other people seems to be perhaps a stretch.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you there too. Ben's talked a lot about having like a rule builder where you can just kind of write even in plain English and drag stuff around and build smart apps.
Yeah, and I think that in Wigwag, I should look closer at it. I believe that what they're calling is device.js. It's built on Node.js as the underlying code, and I'm not sure how much of that is of the actual graphical interface is built already, but they're building it as an open interface.
That's awesome.
So it's already being published. So maybe worth taking a look to see whether the community can comment on it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you.
I do believe that there will be some sort of rule building in the SmartThings, experience at some point, whether that resides on the web or somewhere else. I think that we can count on that. I just can't tell you when. We could easily build, an if type interface where you can just do like one simple thing, but that's just not going to satisfy most people. So we really have to balance the powerful nature of doing different conditional type statements, but also making it easy, because the people who are going to understand the logic of like really complex conditional statements are going to quickly want to fall back and just write the code. So we just need to find that like balance of like, all right, how powerful is too powerful where it becomes cumbersome. So we just haven't been able to find that balance, and hence why we haven't released any sort of rule builder yet.
I
There's also
agree
the
that
trap of, doing nothing versus doing something. Even if it's not a perfect solution, giving us something is better than the not rule builder that we have now.
I
Just a thought.
wholly support the idea of don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, but we weren't even near good, I don't think.
This is Terry again. One thing that I was thinking of while working on an app the last 2 days is reusable components that might make sense. I mean, so many apps do the same thing. For example, you say when a trigger happens, pick from a list of devices, or they'd be lights, and then so everybody writes a section, say, okay, you can pick lights, you can pick locks, and so on. And that part of code is almost cut and paste 100 or 200 lines of code from app to app to app to app. They all do the same thing. And if there be a way to take those blocks of code and encapsulate them, so we have at least a template app that makes sense from a bare bones perspective, or a way of putting macros in the code, like C macros that would represent, okay, these are the pages that will let the target triggered devices be. Does that make sense? I just find myself doing a lot of cut and pasting of code. There's a lot of redundant code.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think extending the tools, the developer tools, to have like greater contextual awareness and like some code completion and some other things to ease some of that burden, I think will help. So I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense, because if I were to start to type in a code, it could even pull up a code block and paste it in for me. That kind of would make sense, right? If it recognizes what I'm trying to do, or if there's a drop-down menu of saying what kind of device, almost like what the ending app does. The concept of device type or device capability. So now you kind of want an app capability. I want an app that allows me to take a condition and then let me select target devices. That would then put the building blocks in place for you then to edit.
If you guys do roll out some form of IntelliSense, if you could just make an option to turn it off.
Yeah, were you the one who commented on the forums about how it can quickly turn into something else?
Yeah, IntelliNonsense.
Yeah.
Menace. Yeah. I mean, it's great for exploration, but unless you capture every single thing that that exists in there, somebody's going to be typing in functions that are going to be auto-corrected the wrong way, or one that doesn't get in the way.
It's especially challenging with dynamic language like Groovy. I mean, IntelliJ and other IDEs are just, they still struggle with it, getting it right. So I am curious for people's, biggest, complaints or challenges with the existing documentation. I mean, if there are certain areas that's like, just fix this, it would make my life so much easier, or, particular areas that you just identify as, hurdles to, being productive and creating stuff. I would like to know that, because that helps us prioritize what we do.
I said it in chat, but all I want is Java docs.
Java docs?
Just auto-generate documentation. I don't care if there's metadata or not. Just let me know what methods exist and what I have to pass them. I will fight my way through everything else. I just have to know it exists.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm for Java docs too. I've started writing my code with Java docs in it just in case.
All right.
That should be easy to add, right? Or
Should just be run a documenter against it and give us a link. Theoretically.
Wait, so we have some now. So tell me the particular shortfalls of what we have.
They're incomplete.
The Java docs?
Yeah, the reference docs that are linked to,
It's incomplete and outdated.
incomplete and outdated.
So when the capability taxonomy and the class definitions, those are like generated, but they're just not generated often enough. We're finding that they're out of date. Is that correct? Because
Well,
we should be able to like
they're
have
not.
those generate all the time.
I think they're extensive either.
There's not much in there. So like if I look at location, it has modes, but theoretically there's some kind of magical sunset and sunset time that isn't in here.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Terry. I agree, right? I'm looking at the capability taxonomy, and it's pretty bare bones. Some of them look really rich, where there's lock codes, lists 7 different methods, which is great. Others where there's no methods, no commands listed.
And some of them may not have commands.
All right, some of them may have attributes, I guess, right? True. And then in some cases, I guess there's attributes that we'd like to have that aren't there, and that's a different question, I suppose. The one that came up, I was working with a number of buttons on a multi-button device, and Matt Frank I was working with, right, had in his device handler put in num buttons as an attribute. And I might argue want to use buttons quantity, but regardless, that attribute isn't listed under the buttons capability. So where we're inventing a new capability on the fly, or a new attribute on the fly, or is there an attribute that is just missing from the documentation?
It sounds like he's inventing one.
Yeah, it's a combination of things sometimes, right? Sometimes I think there may be some attributes that just haven't been exposed. Or another case, right, where we need a procedure for, okay, we're writing a device handler, building it on an existing capability. We're thinking this capability needs some enhancement. What's the best procedure to go through to do an enhancement request and create a good standard for future device handlers, or to look at the existing device handlers that have worked around that problem already.
Also on the JavaDoc front, it would be nice to have all the Groovy libraries that are available documented within the SmartThings site.
Wow,
What do you mean
that's a
by
lot.
Groovy libraries that are available?
Well, some libraries you can include in your Smart app. You can import libraries, but I don't know which ones they are. Yeah, like the JSON parser, or there's some other standard libraries that I've seen and been able to include once I saw that it was possible. So just knowing what those are, and ideally having documentation all built into a single SmartThings site, not entirely dissimilar from how the Android documentation is set up. You know, not all of that is custom Android. A lot of it is just things that Java can do, but it's all in the Android developer site.
Some of them are, some aren't. Like java.ot you can call in, but you can't call some of the sub-libraries under the ot. But isn't there just a straightforward rule on what is importable? You guys, Major, maybe you know that?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I think you'd have to just look at like the Groovy docs to see what you can include. Yeah, I'm not sure like if there's stuff that's not available.
Well, there's a lot of the stuff that violates what you guys have set up as your security rules.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of the libraries you can't call in. I think that's something either you or Ben, could you guys ask? Maybe Bob would know.
Yep.
There's like a strict, there's a setup you guys used originally said we can import these and all of these you can't. It's bringing in all the sub libraries underneath what you can would just be, that'd be a ton. You can go out and look it up if you knew what the top levels were at least.
Cool. I'll ask him.
And in the capabilities taxonomy, there like some things are self-evident, some things are not self-evident. Like the power and the energy meter in the capabilities taxonomy, I had to ask somebody what the difference between a power meter and an energy meter was, because it's not documented.
Right. I mean, then you kind of like have a balance where those are generated. Would we have just, the comments generated along with them, or would we have an ancillary, document that like describes them? I mean, what's preferable?
I think that they need their own, like it needs its own documentation. Each of these capabilities and their methods should be documented extensively. It probably goes beyond automatically generating them,
Right.
because, like it's the same thing with speech synthesis.
Power and energy aren't part of SmartThings. That's part of Z-Wave and device meters of any kind.
Yeah, but we want to be
Power
able
and
to
energy
facilitate
is defined
people
outside.
using them. I would like to have, correlate like all the different, things in one place for people, so they don't have to go and search like, Groovy or other like Z-Wave boards or, specific device capabilities. So I'd love to have it here as well. And so I hear your point. Maybe having some sort of generated, list like this taxonomy here, but then have them be linkable or something where you can go and get greater information on each one, if there is in fact some. Some of them might be so simple that we don't have much other documentation, but at the very least, link it to like an example of use or something.
Well, it's not completely automatically generated, because there's devices that have capabilities that aren't being documented at all, like air pressure, CO2, pressure.
So are you talking about? I mean, those capabilities haven't been pulled into SmartThings yet, though. We don't have an air pressure. Yeah. I mean, so you're talking about like barometric pressure.
Correct.
But yeah, I mean, I think that there's a number of things that actually have to be added before we can count them among our capabilities.
Which is what I mean. Todd was saying that these are just strictly, you wouldn't want to document them because they're Z-Wave things or they're this thing, but these are SmartThings capabilities that you guys have implemented.
Yeah, these are the SmartThings implemented capabilities, and so I would be surprised if there are capabilities that we offer that aren't listed here, because this is generated, but we should definitely find out. There should be like a generated date and things like that are here.
If you read up on Java docs a little bit, I think that would really help you guys as you define new methods and device capabilities and such. If it gets documented when these people are writing the methods, Ben, that when you guys then do a generate, it automatically goes out once it's implemented.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if Scott were on, he could talk more at length about Java docs and how we're implementing them or what our plans are.
I mean, one of the things that we used to do is we generate the header files, which had the code spec built into the headers. So you spec'd it out, and then the developer would come in and fill those methods in. Essentially, they were just putting together the black boxes. And when you hit your generator, your documents, it was built on the spec, and then your tester can then come along and test it per the spec with the code right there. It makes that closed loop of code development pretty nice. And I think that, I appreciate we're trying to get everything out there as fast as possible, but if you look at the methods and the headers and some of the documentation in the files that probably all of us have generated, we're pretty sparse in the description of what we're trying to do mode. We just get it to work. I'm just as guilty. But I think it's time to now just go back and start, coding like we mean it.
Agreed. And that's been something that we've been communicating internally as part of our 2015 plan. Trying to cut back on adding new edge case things. Some of you might say that we haven't been adding them recently, but I think you'll see a sort of like a flourish of new things as we come into the new year, and then we're going to like kind of go back and really like get some of these other things that are maybe 85% done or something like that all the way done, and part of that means documented as well. So it is a priority. It's been priority all the way up to Alex. So
So I don't know how much longer I'm going to be on here. We don't have any power out here. We've got 40, 50 mile an hour winds. Been out with power this afternoon. Running out of battery.
oh man, right?
How come my smart things isn't working? My light won't go on. Andrew, are you in the closet? When you coming out?
I'm never coming out. Ermin's out already.
So all right, what else can we? What else? Is maybe even things that we have don't have at all, or specific examples that people have been craving. I know that there was mentioned device type documentation. I think that's probably always going to lag behind a little bit from smart apps, because I think despite the need, and it's more difficult to do device types, there's probably fewer people doing those than smart apps. But I'd love to hear what some of the examples of device type docs that are needed to.
This is Terry. So the biggest thing with device types, and I got to kind of mention that, is understanding how to map to the existing capabilities or decide if there's a new capability. Right? Or do we need to expand a capability? So take an example, a multi-button remote. Is that capability.button or is that capability.buttons? And there's a big difference, right? A single button is different than a set of buttons. A set of buttons may be considered a keypad. A set of buttons needs to have the attribute num button, so I know how many buttons I've got to work with.
Right.
A keyboard is again something different. On the other hand, the value of not creating new capabilities means that your device type is instantly compatible with more existing apps and more new apps. The newer capabilities we create, or the more capabilities we create, the more difficult it's going to be to create compatible apps, because your app now has to handle. If your app could handle more capabilities, then it has to have more code to do that. So I'll give you an example. The device type for the Aeon Minimote, right? It's a 4-button remote. I think we're pretty familiar with it. When you hold the buttons on it, so it has 4 visible buttons, and then pressing and holding gives you the equivalent of 4 more buttons. I believe that really is an 8-button remote, because from a hardware perspective, holding a button doesn't do anything like tell you how long it was held. It simply sends a higher button number through the Z-Wave. And thus the implementation was, somebody made a design decision to say message is pushed or held and then the button number. But really, I think it should return button numbers 1 through 8 rather than 1 through 4 with the attribute held. Does it, are they both possibly correct answers? Sure, but the way you code apps around that is quite different. And where it became difficult in the app I was writing is I want to make my app work with both 4-button remotes, 8-button remotes, 7-button remotes. I shouldn't have to check whether it's held if pushing a button, if knowing a button is pushed is sufficient.
Right.
And so that way, we need really good standards to help device handler writers or device type writers make those design decisions. A keyboard, as I give the example I gave too, is a keyboard. When I press Shift to get the exclamation mark, you don't need to know that I press Shift 1. On the other hand, Control A is different than an A, I think, or at least Alt A and so on. So there's, those subtleties do exist in the devices. Anybody can chip in with other device types where they think they may have a new capability or where they think it may map to an existing capability. We probably all thought of examples, maybe, especially as we come up with really innovative device types.
Yeah. All right.
Power is on.
So what would help in the short term is, as we already mentioned, make sure the capabilities documentation is as fleshed out and fresh as possible. But secondly, have a procedure for people to discuss questions about the existing capabilities and or propose new capabilities so that they can quickly become standardized and realized so I can move ahead and write my device type and have some confidence that the device type will have a good lifetime.
Could we have a developer wiki that is developer editable so that we could make suggestions among ourselves and propose these new capabilities?
There's no reason why we couldn't have that. I tend to worry about the proliferation of like resources and like where like things reside. Like, oh, that's in the knowledge base, or that's in the documentation, or that's on the forum, or that's in the wiki. I haven't found a tool that can sort of aggregate a lot of those. We have a lot because of that. We have a lot of like duplicated content from here and there. And there is it's not very good, and it's probably not useful for this discussion. But there is a wiki capability within the community site. But yeah, I'd be open to it, and obviously it could be done without me being, us approving it. It can be an unofficial thing too. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if people have one that they like or they've seen great examples. I'd sure like to see them.
Is there any push for us all to be using GitHub or something like that, or a Git repository, so that we could take advantage of Git's existing structure for that? Issues, wikis, pull requests. Because if a pull request exists and everybody, can start commenting on it. So let's say I create a device type, right, and I do this thing regarding held versus pushed. The community that's interested in that can start to comment on it before it becomes merged into the code.
Yeah, and there is a great, there is some GitHub integration right now. There's greater GitHub integration coming soon, and I think I've been saying that for about a year or at least 6 months. But I believe hashtag post CES, it will be something that we get out there. As you know now, you can on the documentation make pull requests. Anyone can do it. Anyone can modify and make pull requests or comment on it. So the documentation is available for that. But even more so, like in the capabilities and stuff, maybe we want to like increase that functionality in some way.
Yeah, I think with
Go ahead. I just commented. I'm grateful to see it in the documentation section. That's exactly what I'd like to see for the all the public smart apps and device handlers. Because as I said, I mentioned the Aeon Mini Mote. I would love to put in a pull request for that change I just described to you, or that issue I have, and I'm absolutely would love the pull request to be commented on before it would move along or be abandoned.
Yeah.
And I could do it right now. I've got the option of doing it in the forum and hope people comment on it there. But the GitHub has a structure for it that is tied directly to the related code changes. The related code changes and so on, and even a direct merge. That way, SmartThings can take advantage of our code if they want to by just merging it in instead of even having to look through a discussion and taking it from there from scratch.
Yeah, Terry, that's a good point. I've always thought that there should be like on our GitHub, public GitHub, there should be like a repository of all the device types, and pull requests could be made. Eventually, have some, like smart apps in there too, where you guys can just like update them as they need updates.
Yeah, because that's what I mean. What you're seeing now is things that are getting. You're talking about duplication. Look at the GE Link light bulbs. There's like 4 different versions of that thing floating around on the message board now because somebody will fix it, but there's no way to push that fix back into the official repository.
Yeah, there will be.
Ben, I have a quick Harmony question for you. Is there a reason the Harmony device is not published?
You mean the changed device?
No, the actual hub device.
Do you mean not published into labs, or not published at all?
Well, it's published and functional, but I mean the actual code for the device is nowhere to be found.
Okay. I don't know the reason for that.
There's 2 smart apps, but there's no there actually exists a device, and the device is nowhere to be found.
Just from like a on GitHub sort of perspective.
Well, I can't find it. Go ahead.
It's not in the example.
Within the IDE, if you look at the apps, the list of apps that are in the labs, there's a few devices that are out there, but their device type code isn't listed in the lab section under the IDE.
Tyler, were you going to say something?
I was going to say what he just said.
Okay.
I'm curious. I know Harmony's a sore point. I know it's not going to go away anytime soon, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that would like to fix it. But since the problem exists in the device itself, nobody has access to it. So
I wouldn't go as far as saying that I'm sorry, Ermin, can you mute yourself? That a problem exists in the device type itself. There's a couple issues. First of all, they just issued a firmware update to the Harmony Hub that broke all of their integrations, including IFT, the Harmony to IFT integration, not SmartThings. So there's an issue on their side as well. And then as recent as a week ago, there was a problem with the discovery on our side that's fixed. So as soon as we fixed that, something broke on their end. So it's a little, it's going back and forth. But we can look into why that's not published as an example. But right now, to my understanding, is that our service manager for the Harmony Connect Hub, or the Harmony Connect Service Manager, is working, but the firmware that they sent out this last week is broken.
Well, they're fundamentally broken, but that's a separate issue.
Sorry, I was muted. I didn't hear that. What was that?
I said that Harmony is fundamentally broken as far as software is concerned, but that's a separate issue.
I used it for a whole 2 days at my house and then decided that I'd rather have 9 remotes.
I had to guess on the little examples list, it's because there's some hard-coded token or something in there. That's what I had to guess.
Who is responsible for the SmartThings side of the Harmony device? Is it Harmony or is it SmartThings? Because I've got 2 of those hubs, and when you have 2 of them, there's only one smart app between the 2 of them. And so if I allow one of them to have access to, like I've got one in my entertainment center, one in my bedroom, you get it, and the mobile app, you get everything that you agreed that SmartThings has access to shows up in the mobile app for both of them.
So in other words, it's not multi-instance aware.
So they're responsible obviously for when you load up the Harmony Home application and you connect to the SmartThings Hub, that's on their end. The service manager was a mutual thing, I believe.
So the smart app should behave like some of the other things where you could have multiple, I guess Ubis or the weather stations, how it shows multiple devices, multiple instances of the smart app. Right now, the Harmony, when you load it, you load one and agree to the authentication process. Any devices that you agree to will show up for all of the hubs then. So It's not awful, but it's not good either.
All right. Jim, as you've probably spent the most time looking at the documents in the last week, what are some things that you think that are closer than others to being updated, or even what are some of the things that have been updated that people might not have noticed? One of the things we're going to try to do is in the new year, it's one of our resolutions, basically get information out there a little bit more. One of them is be like, weekly or some sort of time frame of like what's being updated in the docs, what's been updated in the mobile apps and on platform for as far as a change log. We'd like to get some sort of semblance of a known issues, post out there and have that be edited. And then finally, a broader roadmap so that people can look to that and either complain if their thing isn't on there or be, happy that their thing is on there. So, that's all sorts of things that we're planning on doing in the new year, right after CES. But Jim, why don't you if you say some things about what you kind of been working on?
Yeah, so the main changes that have already gone in, as I go through and review the documentation, some areas I have the benefit of being new as well. So as I'm going through and trying things out, if things aren't clear to me, then I will update the documentation. So, for example, our preferences, and this has been in the Smart App Developers Guide, our preferences section was really a combination of incomplete and wrong. And that's been updated. And there's still some work to do there, but to be more thorough so that people know how you can build up preferences sections, and with some examples and documentation around that. Also, we reworked the Bon Voyage example to be more of a tutorial. And that's probably not super useful necessarily to some of the people on this call who are more advanced, but that's, as I'm working my way through, those are the key changes that I've made. And what I'm also working on now is, a better getting started experience in our documentation. Currently, for example, when I started this job, came home at night and started writing a smart app. And, within 5 or 10 minutes, I, turned a light bulb in my office on. And it was that initial moment like, oh, that's pretty cool. But in our current documentation, you have to kind of wade through and find at the very end, tuck through into the guide of like getting your first app up and running. And I don't think that it needs to be that buried. I think you should be able to get in and get going quick. So trying to pull that forward into a better getting started guide. So those have been the changes that I have made or I'm working on. And I think, again, that maybe plays to some of the different audience than who's on this call, because I think a lot of you guys have been doing this and you're already way ahead of me. But it's good also then to hear that, the reference doc, the Java docs are what you guys, really, really feel like is missing. So I think that's obviously going on the list as well.
I like the Firebase documentation, as you mentioned earlier. And if you look at the Ruby on Rails documentation, they have a really good getting started experience that takes you from the absolute beginning to end of getting a functional application up and running. And Firebase has the same thing. And those things should be put front and center. And I think one additional change that could make a world of difference in the documentation is the pagination as it is right now. because some of the menu items and pages aren't listed in the sidebar, but you would never know it unless you click the next button to get to the next page if there's more information to be found.
Yeah, so this is, I kind of touched on this earlier. There's, I think, a holistic look at our documentation, both with the tooling and with the organization. Right now, a lot of our documentation, and maybe you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but in some cases, there's almost too much. It's almost like overwhelming. Like there's several pages of detailed background, and that may be useful in a certain context, but it's easy to get lost. And, like you mentioned, Jody, I have to know the structure and navigate through. And part of that's an artifact of the tool we use of Read the Docs, and part of it is an artifact of how we've organized it. So I'm not there to the point of reorganizing yet. I think I'm too, I'm too new. I'm too, into the forest looking at the trees right now to be able to step back yet. But there is work that we can do around that. What was the other? You mentioned Ruby on Rails. What was the other documentation or getting started guide?
Firebase.
Firebase.
Yeah, like we want to outline the developer portal to be like just so easy to use for anyone. Just basically getting started, figuring out what you can do like in human English, because it's hard to write good documentation. So
yeah, we're kind of at this place where there's actually an onslaught of a bunch of new people coming onto the platform. They have really new questions, not the ones that most of you guys here are asking right now. I think you guys are more advanced, and so I think what we have to do is sort of push on both sides of the documentation, the stuff for the real beginners to help get them indoctrinated, even just to know what's possible is like a big thing that we don't do a good job of explaining. And then, also on these other edge where like you guys are trying to do things that we've never even thought of. And, that's part of the problem is how do we write documentation for things that we don't know what you're going to do yet. But I think that's part of our goal is to like enable everyone who's really like doing cool device types and new smart apps to do that. But then temper it with like this developer portal that's really pretty welcoming and information rich. All right. Well, we have a few more minutes left. If anyone has any other questions or suggestions that we should incorporate in the next couple weeks.
anybody going to CES?
Anybody? I am.
I'm tempted, but it's coming up too soon.
Yeah.
We're doing a hackathon there with AT&T actually this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. It's like, I want to say there's like 2,000 or 1,000 developers. We're sending some hardware there, so I'll make sure to like see what cool things are built and do a post on the community site or the blog with what people build.
All right. Any parting question not related to documentation that you want to slip in that I may or may not answer? No? That's crazy.
Okay, no, I'll ask one, right? So there's a thread that just came up, and it's always, you think it's a couple complainers, right, about things, SmartThings doesn't work, I'm fed up. I think it's up to well over 130 posts now. And Alex contributed, he actually joined the discussion, which I think a lot of people are appreciating that the CEO is listening. But it seems like a lot of the old problems. I mean, do you have a comment as to what you guys do internally with that?
Well, there's two things. There's the normal dynamic that how we normally communicate and how things, sort of go from an get escalated in certain ways. Believe me, like not anything like this post goes on the community site without the top levels of the organization seeing it. So I mean, if that's part of the goal of these sorts of messages, that's working. I don't really want to necessarily encourage it because I think like one of these pops up every like month or so, and depending on how popular it gets or vitriolic it is, we try to chime in. But then there's this other like timing where like, and we're really going to hope to get better about this. But right now we are very much like directing much of our focus towards CES. It's in some ways it's different for us post Samsung in that we're much more heavily involved with how they are presenting at CES. It's trying to get a whole backlog of new devices like Samsung devices integrated into the platform. A lot of new things that we want to announce, and frankly, we're a little bit prioritizing towards a conference, which is not something that we want to do, and we'll make a big push after CES to not do. But we're overhauling how we internally communicate things, how because we're growing at such a pace, the old ways no longer scale. We were at maybe 40 something, maybe just near 50 at time of acquisition. We're well past 80, 85 now, and I think by summer we might be up to 200. And so we're the types of scale that we're exploring will not allow our current communication patterns to be in place. And so we're really looking at how we do that. How we be more transparent, how we get information out there faster. And this isn't something that, the roadmap isn't like, it's not like it's like all set in stone and we're just not sharing it. It's just that like, it fluctuates and it's, fairly agile. And so we're trying to like figure out like when's the best places to share, how to not get people's hopes up and on certain things or crush people's spirits in other cases. But as Alex mentioned on that latest thread, the level of transparency and information that we're wanting to share is we're not sharing it because we're like too starved for time. It's not because we have some sort of philosophy of not sharing, and we're just going to have to make time as an organization to do that because it's important.
No, I understand, and I definitely understand that. One of the issues, though, on some of those topics is the redundancy of the same complaint coming up that's come up before, or people describing the same problem in different ways. And so sometimes things look blown out of proportion because it's really one problem described a dozen different ways. So it looks like a dozen problems. One thing I've seen in the past and is something like user voice, where problems get, there's a redundancy eliminator when you try to type in a problem or a bug or an issue. I think a lot of bug tracking systems do this. And then others can, instead of writing a new problem, they can just vote up. And in fact, people are given an allocation of votes. They may be given 10 votes that they can allocate 1, 2, or 3 at a time to their top problems. That helps you see what the biggest concerns are. And then you can also communicate as to, we've got this one on hold, we're not going to deal with it. And people can see that right on the problem, or they can see, if it is or is not on your roadmap and what kind of progress you're making on it. I suggest user voice just because I like their interface. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. I mean, it's a feature request system, a bug triage sort of system, and we like it in concept. It goes back to me to the idea of having, yet another place to do things. And, I've been kind of hoping, maybe beyond hope, that discourse add functionality like that, where it seems like they would, because they're the same people behind what's that code site?
Stack Overflow.
Yeah, it's Stack Overflow, and so it's related to like questions and answers. But getting something like that, maybe it's a replacement of our current knowledge base, although that's tied to Zendesk. Maybe it's an extension to Jira, which we use for all of our internal feature and bug tracking. I would love to have it just be not another tool that we, maybe there's an extension from user voice into Jira. Who knows? But love to look at it. Totally something that we want to do, and it's just one of those things like, all right, whose priority is that going to be for, a month. So, all right, that's good. Good stuff. Well, I know it's a few minutes over. It was a good discussion. Like always, this has been recorded, so people can check it out later. We'll share it on the forums. There's a Terry just posted a little thing there, so it's sort of like a whole synopsis of the goal that he was talking about. Nice. Well, unless there's anything else, I say we call it. I hope everyone has a great new year, and we will see about when we'll try to schedule the next meeting. Stick around or like keep on the forums for that. I'm not sure exactly when it'll be. We might try to do one from the CES conference, or maybe it'll be a little different. But we'll certainly have one soon after. All right. Great. Thanks, guys.
See you. Have a happy
Thanks.
new year.
Happy New Year.